From game day to signing day, breaking down every snap and all the news on Alabama's top football recruits. It's time for Crimson and Blue Chips with your host, John Garcia Jr.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome into a fresh week of Crimson and Blue Chips. I'm your host, John Garcia Jr. Happy Monday to you. Lot to get to on this particular program. We will bring back Kirk McNair, a longtime writer covering Alabama, currently working for Bama Online. He is going to join us here in just a couple of minutes. Before that point, I'm going to give my final thoughts on Bama Arkanas State. Caught the rewatch on Sunday. Have a couple of thoughts that I didn't necessarily have following the live look at the Tide and Red Wolves. So we'll do that, get to Kirk, and then Q&A, of course, to take us home as we do each and every time right here at hashtag CABC. Talking Tide, looking to move into SEC play with efficiency as the #1 team in the United States of America. A fresh hashtag CABC with Kirk McNair and you coming up right now. As mentioned, on Sunday, took the liberty of DVRing that Alabama Arkanas State game and caught some things that I didn't necessarily catch earlier. Took to Twitter just to share the thoughts immediately after rewatching, and then we'll recap some of that now. So my bullet points were very simple. Mike Locksley, diverse with his sets, with motion on offense. The Harrises, fire emoji at running back. They're also good blockers, which is very important in any passing offense. Tua and Jalen, the quarterbacks, look settled in the pocket with good flow. Thought the offensive line was questionable. The pass protection took a step back. Everybody had failures along that offensive line. Most notably, 66, 74, and 82, actually, as a pass blocker on 2 occasions. Q still wowing. That was another bullet point. Quinnen Williams, of course, still dominant and the best player on that Alabama defense through 2 games, in my opinion. Speaking of the defense, Savion Smith, like we scouted all along, high risk, high reward. I think that is going to be his game. It has gotten him great success with a pick 6 on Saturday, and it has also gotten him in trouble. He gave up a touchdown for that same type of feel that he exhibits. We'll expand on that a little bit. And then Dylan Moses, great instincts as well as pass rushing prowess. You know, between he and Mac Wilson, we thought one or both of those guys could end up rushing the passer, helping out on the edge a little bit more. And I think you could really take your pick at this point. I think Mac a little bit better at rushing from depth, so from the traditional linebacker spot. Moses a little bit better with the conventional edge rush, hand in the dirt, standing up on the edge, coming off the snap of the football. So a good problem for Alabama to have. And again, if those guys aren't doing so well in their zone drops, which was, again, a bit of an issue on Saturday, maybe you could bring in more defensive backs and use those 2 as more situational pass rushers, or assign them man-to-man responsibility instead of having to get to those zone drops. I think it'll be a work in progress either way. So let's expand on some of these thoughts. Mike Locksley, producer Kev put out a tweet that I pretty much agree with at this point. The offensive MVP for Alabama through 2 games, I got to go with Mike Locksley. I think he has been very consistent, whether it is run-pass balance, whether it is maintaining the themes of the offense regardless of which quarterback is on the football field. I mean, heck, even when Mac Jones comes in as the 3rd quarterback, they're running quarterback draw. You know, the same type of things they would run with both Tua and Jalen Hurts in the game. So I think Mike Locksley has been very consistent regardless of which quarterback's in there. He is not dramatically changing the play calling, at least from where I sit, when one quarterback is in versus the other. Each quarterback is seemingly eased into each game with simple throws. The reads are very, very quick and easy. It's almost a quick game that Alabama is imploring with these quarterbacks, especially early in their drives. So for Tua, the first couple of drives have seemed that way over the last few weeks. And then for Jalen, when he gets in, usually drives 4, 5, and 6, it's like it's reversed all over again. I think Mike Locksley has been very consistent with both guys. And then, as I mentioned on Twitter, diverse with the sets in motion as well, particularly with the tight end. Irv Smith is clearly the top tight end in the offense right now, and Alabama is using him in a lot of ways. It's easy to see in the passing game where he's caught a couple of passes, including a touchdown from Jalen Hurts on Saturday, but he's also using him to mess with different sets on defense. So motioning him from one spot of the line to the other, one side of the line, I should say, to the other. It does a lot of things. It could flip the strength of the offense, which inverts the defense that you're going up against. It could identify man versus zone coverage, which makes it that much easier for whichever quarterback is in the game. And then when the runs are predicated on that, Mike has done a good job of balancing that, meaning sometimes you go with that motion and sometimes you run specifically against that motion. The sets have remained more wide open in addition to the tight end. Multiple receivers, 3+. It seems like that's kind of the base offense right now for Alabama, and I think it's working that way. You're spreading out the defense a little bit more, and that tight end can be used as a run blocker, as a pass blocker, which Irv didn't do such a good job at on Saturday, but he can be a pass blocker, and obviously as a wide receiver. So I thought the sets that Mike put out there were pretty diverse. The motion, and it wasn't just him, but the motion from Irv Smith really caught my attention because the defense, if you had a theme all week, hey, if 82 comes from one side to the other, we're doing this. That didn't really help you based on the play calling because sometimes it was behind 82, sometimes it was opposite 82. He was pass setting, he was going out for passes, things like that. So I thought Locksley did a really good job, and he has been very consistent. A big knock on Jalen Hurts is his inability to get through the progression, read 2, read 3, etc. Well, if he's easing these quarterbacks into the game, that first read is there. Front side reading has been very consistent with these quarterbacks. Only a few times, particularly against Louisville, did Tua Tagovailoa have to get to that third progression. And that is indication of how good the pass protection was in that game. So that's probably part of it. But I think getting there is a luxury, and Locksley is simplifying it if that is a hindrance of Jalen Hurts. I don't think I have to say much about the running backs. Both of them, Damian Harris, Najee Harris, pretty much doing whatever they want. Consistent, yards after contact, finishing forward, picking up the blitz well, which is, I think, the least talked about element of running back evaluation is how well these guys are not only efficient in blocking, but how willing are they to go stick their nose in. It's not fun to absorb a defensive end that is unblocked. It is not fun to absorb a linebacker blitzing that is untouched before you get there. That's not fun. That's not necessarily a natural running back trait either. That is learned. That is a learned behavior, and those two are the best two on that Alabama roster, with no disrespect to Josh Jacobs or Brian Robinson. But those guys are seemingly going to get going, and whoever has the hot hand is going to continue to get the rock. I don't think I have to say too much about those guys. It's very easy to see. Najee Harris looked like the 5-star that he was on Saturday. We mentioned the quarterbacks. I thought both guys settled in the pocket. It looked fairly easy for them. Both guys were, again, front side readers. Didn't have to be too sophisticated. Most of the chunk plays were the easiest throws quarterbacks can make. Down the middle, in your line of sight, from pre-snap to snap to that window emerging and anticipating that throw, it was all right there for both quarterbacks. Tua got away with a big mistake early on, staring down his initial read, delivering the ball there, and the cornerback simply dropped the easiest interception he'll ever have. And in, Power 5 versus non-Power 5 fashion, the next play was a touchdown to Henry Ruggs on, once again, a window throw in the middle, in between the hashes. That is what Mike Locksley is doing. And I think it goes into the scouting report for both quarterbacks. How are you going to defend either guy at this point? With the emergence and continued consistency of these wide receivers, you can't sit back because we know Bama can run the football. And the Bama O-line has been better at run blocking than pass blocking through 2 games. So you can't really sit back. You have to allocate guys to the box. And if you do that, guess what that creates? Simple zone or straight man coverage. And there's nothing easier to read as a quarterback than one of those 2 basic defenses. If you know you've got man coverage and you got a man coverage beater at wide receiver, which Bama has 4 already in Smith, Judy, Ruggs, Waddle, not Henry Riggs, by the way. If you watched that broadcast like I did Sunday, you were laughing at that one. But if you've got 4 man beaters, how in the world do you defend this Alabama offense? Without going full throttle, Bama put up 50 in week 1 and week 2. And it is hard to imagine that slowing down because it's a pick your poison. And that's regardless of quarterback, guys and gals. Regardless of quarterback. Look, nobody's going to discount Tua Tagovailoa's ability to push the football down the field more consistently, more efficiently, and it's more of a threat. That's very acknowledged and very clear. However, if Jalen Hurts is a runner and you are that much more inclined to play near the line of scrimmage, the advantage goes right back to those wide receivers that they face less zone coverage or less complex zone coverage and more man coverage or simple zone coverage, which makes it that much easier for Jalen Hurts. And if the knock on him is that he can't get off of his first or second read, well, guess what? If you're stacking the box, he didn't have to with these wide receivers. And that is the difference with this Alabama offense. It's not just one guy. It's not just Julio or Coop or Calvin Ridley. It's 4 guys that can all win with routes, in addition to explosiveness, in addition to speed. That is a benefit for Mike Locksley. It is helping each quarterback and even helping the running backs. So I don't quite know how you defend Alabama without excellent man coverage corners, and who has 4 of those sitting around on a roster. We'll see how Ole Miss tries on Saturday. Other bullet points, pretty obvious. Quinnen Williams, still dominant. The best lineman on Alabama's roster through 2 games. He is physical at the point of attack. He is always in the backfield. And if he is making contact with a runner, it is at the line of scrimmage or behind the line of scrimmage, putting pressure on the quarterback even when he doesn't get the sack. Q has been a blossoming star through 2 weeks, and I don't think it slows down anytime soon. We mentioned the linebackers, Savion Smith as well. Look, he had the pick 6 off of instincts. It was a corner cat. He's clearly the guy that Nick Saban, Tosh Lupoy, Carl Scott expect to be the most physical corner. So he's the guy that they've used for those corner blitzes on the short side of the field. So his instincts took over. He blitzed, and remember, the hot read got Bama last week. When he came off that corner cat against Louisville, they threw it to Seth Dawkins. He made Deontay Thompson miss, and he was off to the races until Dylan Moses caught him 47 yards later. Same scenario on Saturday. Smith coming off the edge, corner cat, except this time he settles a little bit sooner than he did against Louisville, and not only got his hands on the football, obviously came down with it and housed it, but he's always looking to make that play. He will always peek into the backfield, and it diminishes some of his great natural ability, his length, his hips, and his ball skills, because it's like he's trying to cheat the drill. We talked about cheating the drill earlier. He's trying to cheat the drill a little too soon, and it gets him, it bites him in the you-know-what at some points. And I think you saw that on the touchdown. He gave up his inside leverage, peeking into the backfield. Justice Hansen, a pretty good quarterback, delivered an accurate football, and it was an easy touchdown and the only touchdown of the afternoon for Arkansas State. So I think you're going to have to live with the high-risk, high-reward nature of Savion Smith. But you've got Trevon Diggs, you've got Shaheem Carter, you've got Pat Surtain, who played really well through 2 weeks. So you have guys to balance him out. But when it comes to Savion, I think he's going to be a guy who gets Bama fans really excited and then kind of pisses them off a little bit at that same time. But the O-line is the group that I think deserves the most attention following week 2. Big blunders in the pass protection game. And you basically saw it in every way. Week 1, we talked about miscommunication with Alex Leatherwood. It looks like we saw that a little bit again in week 2. But where the concern lies even beyond the miscommunication, as this O-line looks to gel and kind of find its niche, is losing straight up. Lester Cotton, 3 of those, where man on man, he was unable to impede that defensive lineman. And they got hits on the quarterbacks more times than not. Jedrick Wills, very good at right tackle when he was stationary. Mike Locksley had those guys pulling a lot this week. didn't look comfortable pulling. Leatherwood looked very good pulling, especially on the kick-out blocks. I thought he was consistent there. But Wills looked uncomfortable moving. I don't know if that's something they're trying to implement into the offense, if they're trying to get Jedrick Wills on the move to improve that stuff in the short term, but did not look consistent when he was asked to move. And that's as a blocker with the run or the pass, by the way. I thought he gave up the inside a little bit too much. And then, as I mentioned, Irv Smith, great game statistically, but when he is asked to pass block, which, it's not a typical tight end trait, but it looks like it will become a part of this offense. We saw two big mistakes from him in the pass blocking game, so we wonder if that could create some playing time for a couple of other tight ends. But the quarterbacks took a little bit too much heat in this game, and Ole Miss's front four is a little bit more talented than Arkansas State, so I think that's a bit of a concern moving forward. Now, again, it goes into the strengths of the quarterbacking, first reads, easy to diagnose coverages, things like that. It does go hand in hand, and that's why guys like Jalen Hurts were able to get that football off before absorbing big contact on a big Lester Cotton whiff. However, that's not something you want to see consistently. So it goes with the theme and the flow of Bama's offense, but that doesn't mean you want to rely on that. You don't want to have to get rid of that football on read number one every single time because you got a guy in your face. So I think that group still needs to gel. Kirk McNair is going to talk a little bit more about that here in a second, as well as other things. So I just wanted to get my points off in kind of putting a bow on Bama Arkansas State. But for the bigger picture, we're going to head over to Kirk, who has done this a lot longer than yours truly, has a bit of a different perspective. So we're going to look back at this game, but really more at a wide scope of Alabama football, where it sits through 2 weeks, the position battles, the questions, and even some answers.
Always a good time to bring Kirk McNair back on Crimson and Blue Chips. We haven't had him on since the beginning to middle of fall camp, and now, of course, Alabama 2 weeks into the season, so we've got quite the sample for this year's football team, and there's still plenty of questions to be answered. Kirk, I know you're not going to enjoy it, but we're going to begin at the quarterback position. Where were we a few weeks ago, 3.5, 4 weeks ago when we had you on, and where are we right now?
Well, that's true. It was a question that started right after the national championship game last January, continued through a spring in which Tua Tagovailoa did not participate for all practical purposes, but Jalen Hurts didn't show up well in the A-Day game, continued all summer, stories of unhappiness and transfers and all sorts of threats, and got to fall camp, and we didn't know 100%, although most everyone thought that Tua would be the starting quarterback in the first game, and Nick Saban held it to the very end. When Alabama's defense trotted out onto the field, that was the first confirmation that Tua was the starting quarterback. Jalen Hurts played in relief of Tua. Tua played very well in the opening game. Alabama defeated Louisville handily, and Jalen Hurts came in relief and really seemed sort of uninspired. And I think maybe that led to last week's rumor. We haven't gotten this week's yet, but last week's rumor that was making the rounds was that Jalen's parents had talked to Nick Saban, and they did not want him playing anymore this year. They wanted to preserve his redshirt year, and I guess maybe not take any chances with him. And that even got reported by a professional journalist, actually, not just
not an amateur journalist.
No, it was by a guy who's covered Alabama a long time, and I'd heard it, of course, too, and I wasn't buying it, and I certainly wasn't reporting it, and of course, in this game Saturday afternoon, starting Saturday afternoon, it seemed like it was going to go about 8 hours, but it was only 3.5. Against Arkansas State, Jalen did come in, and I thought Jalen looked much, much better in the second game than he did in the first. He seemed to be more animated. He seemed to be more inspired. He seemed on target with his passes. Did a little of what Jalen does, run. He did have a turnover on a fumble, but that was an effort fumble. He was trying to get to the end zone, took a hard hit, and the ball came out down around the goal line. But he he did take Alabama in for scores, and I don't know what's in the future. I'm not going to try to predict that. Nothing would surprise me, including the fact that Glenn continues in the role he's in and continues in it again next year at Alabama. I'm not predicting that. I'm just saying it wouldn't surprise me. So, in any event, we know we have, in my opinion, two very good quarterbacks. And we've said it before, and I don't mind repeating it over and over. Tua sees the field so well, makes quick decisions, and is as accurate a passer as I've ever seen in college football. So that is a nightmare for opponents. In Alabama's in the offense that Nick Saban wants, which is obviously he wants to be able to run it between the tackles or wherever, and he wants to be able to throw the ball downfield. So Tua is certainly capable of delivering there.
Do you see it? I mean, I don't know. I don't have the snap counts in front of me, but, it seems like it's 3 series for one, 3 series for the other, and then after that it's kind of almost a back and forth. Do you see it continuing this way, at least in the near future, where it's not a clear 50-50 split? Let's say it's 60-40 towards Tua. Do you see that continuing, at least in the short term, just with Bama going to both, seemingly regardless of, who threw that last touchdown or who made the play? It seemed like it was almost scheduled from Alabama. Do you see something like that continuing, or is this still truly an experimental phase, in your opinion?
I'm not sure. It could. I think in these first 2 games, it may have been scripted for different reasons. Maybe the first time because Nick Saban wanted to prove his point that both quarterbacks had a role, and he ended to use them both. Ordinarily, I would say that he would have proved his point had Jalen performed better in that first game. And I think that maybe it was scripted again in the second game, as we're going to find out what Jalen Hurts is about. We've got to know, and I think he responded to that. If that's the case, I'm speculating here. Now, going forward, I'm not sure. I think it won't be scripted going forward, though. Assuming it has in these first 2 games, which is nothing more than an assumption on my part. Nick Saban got a little testy when somebody asked him if there was a package for Jalen before last week's game. He gave the well, why don't I just call the other coach and tell him?
Sure.
The answer, which one he drags out every now and then. But going forward, I'm not sure. We start conference games this week, going to Ole Miss, which is a capable team of offensively for sure. And the team that I think of stuff I've heard from around the country, there have been a lot of predictions that the team that will beat Alabama this year, the team that can upset Alabama, is Ole Miss because of that tremendous passer, Jordan. He's a Hawaiian too. What were the odds that there'd be 2 Hawaiians starting at quarterback in an Alabama Ole Miss game? But he's got good receivers. A.J. Brown certainly is a terrific receiver, and they've added either I think a junior college transfer, Phillips, who apparently is not apparently, I saw him. He is a fine runner. So they've got running and passing. But the thing that most people, I think, pegged those upset predictions on is Alabama's rebuilt secondary. But to date, I'd have to say that the Alabama secondary looks like they've acquitted themselves pretty well against 2 teams that wanted to throw the football. So from that standpoint, I went off on a tangent there, but the main point being was that with the start of the SEC season and tough games coming up, there may not be a script. It may be, Nick Saban being the head coach, making decisions on when and where that Jalen Hurts might have that role that we were promised that he would have with this team. So I guess I'd have to say I don't know, but we'll find out, I think, probably as soon as Saturday.
Yeah, jumping to the defense, Kirk, look, it's clear that Ole Miss is going to score points. I don't know, 70-something against Southern Illinois on Saturday, even though they gave up 40-something, which is a whole different story.
Right.
But look, nobody's worried about Alabama's offense, which is kind of amazing aside from this whole quarterback situation that will always be a conversation point. Alabama scored 50-plus with relative ease these last couple of weeks. So that alone is good for Alabama. On the other side of the ball, obviously, that's where, like you said, some of that concern, some of the bolder predictions have come out with Alabama's theoretical weaknesses on defense. You said that the secondary was shored up. What about that front seven? How should we assess that after 2 games? There was a lot of linebacker question marks in terms of depth coming into the season, maybe some pass rushing question marks coming into the season. How have you noticed, from a bird's eye view, Alabama combat that? Are a couple of guys kind of flashing and ascending? Are a couple of guys going the other way? How do you look at that front seven if we assume the secondary is coming along over the first 2 weeks?
I think it's kind of hard to assess the front seven because of the type teams that Alabama's played in the first 2 games and faces again in the third game. A team that really wants to get the ball out and get it out quickly, and that means it's hard to find a guy that's big and strong enough and also faster than the snap of a football to get back there and really affect the passing game there when it's a catch and release in a hurry kind of also. I'm not going to say that it's been great, but I think there have been certainly things about it that have been great. In that 3-man front of Raekwon Davis, Isaiah Buggs, and then the new guy who to me has been the most impressive so far of the 3, a former end playing nose tackle, Quinnen Williams. So I think they're doing okay, but they haven't really been pushed to stop a kind of a run game that we may not see much of anymore. Sort of you're just not seeing as much of it. The teams that are built to live between the tackles, but you have to have them. You have to have those guys. They have to stop it up. They have to put pressure, and so it really falls to sort of the linebackers, jack linebackers particularly, that they bring in on nickel and dime situations that can do that. And I think that we've, of course, we've had some injuries and some losses. I think that Anthony Jennings and Christian Miller both seem to be adequate, I would say. And we both know from having seen them over the years that they're certainly more than adequate. They're very good football players. But again, I think it's just been a good bit of the scheme that they're against. It's not that they haven't had their moments. They all have. But probably we're waiting for that certain game where things fall Alabama's way and so far as the opponent's plan being squashed maybe and getting that opportunity. As for the inside linebackers, I think that both Dylan Moses and Mac Wilson have been very solid. I think the one exception was and Mac admitted it, and Nick Saban said it too, that Mac, he's the quarterback of that defense or that front, certainly. And there were some communications problems, including even, I think, Mac maybe not communicating to himself a couple of times on wheel routes, but of course the team can't run a wheel route every down. So you're going to get caught every now and then. Everybody is. But I think that Mac looked pretty solid to me Saturday, even though he had been in a boot at least part of the week of the work week with an injury that he had described to us on Monday as a popped scar tissue in his foot from surgery he'd had a year ago or last year. And then the rumor, of course, the rumor mill is always giving us more than we can handle, including that he had a broken foot. But of course, he started the game, and I thought he played fine. I thought he played well in the opportunities he had. And he said it, and I asked him again after the game. I said, we heard the rumor about a broken foot. Obviously, that's not the case. But what is the case? He said, like I told you earlier in the week, it's a scar tissue situation. And he said, I'm straight. He said, I'm great. And he said it was a little pain, but nothing he couldn't deal with. So there we have another rumor. But in I guess as a bottom line, I'd say that everybody at Alabama is looking for that front seven to be better than they are right now, but they're probably better than most front sevens right now, and it's just a matter of how it matches up against what Alabama will be playing against. And I think Alabama has been, since Nick Saban's been here, it's been listed as a 3-4 over-under defense, and I would say that year by year it's gone from probably about 40 to 50% in the early years to well over 60 or 70% now, where Alabama nickel and more and more frequently in dime. So that front seven is usually a front six or a front five, it seems like now, and puts a lot more pressure on the outside linebackers in those situations, because they're the ones that are called on for a pass rush against a team that's putting 3, 4, 5 receivers out on us.
Yeah, and I think there's something to be said for the offensive attack from both Louisville and Arkansas State. A lot of quick game, not a lot of slow developing routes, down the field routes where the quarterback is going to hold the ball. Conversely, it was more, hey, get the ball out because Alabama's kind of coming. So I think that could potentially factor into at least the perception that maybe the front seven isn't clicking as well against the pass. But again, all of that will be tested and proven to some degree on Saturday night. 3 of the next 4 in the SEC West, obviously 2 on the road beginning at us. I don't think anybody's worried about Alabama overlooking this game from a mental standpoint. Look, Ole Miss represents 2 of the last, 5 losses for this program overall, Kirk. So that's an issue. But there are still some question marks with this roster beyond maybe the quarterback distribution and things like that. So what is your biggest question mark? What do we know least about positionally? Which room? Is it the offensive line room, the kicker room? Is it still the quarterback room? Which group do we either not know enough about yet, or is there one that is worthy of concern?
If we had talked last week and told me you were going to ask me that question this week, I probably would have said still the secondary. But I thought that they looked awfully sound Saturday, and even though you say, well, they're playing Arkansas State, those guys were pretty good football players they were playing against. They don't have an overall team or depth like Alabama has, of course. Everybody knows that. But for what they want to do, they had pretty good players, I thought, trying to do it. Good receivers, good back, and just enough running to make you stay home a little bit aware. But I thought both Savion Smith and Diggs and Sertang, the freshman, and it may be pronounced Sertan, I'm not sure about that. But anyway, I know one thing: he's going to be a good football player, and I think that they're looking pretty sound. Also, very happy with the safeties, Devontae Thompson and Xavier McKinney. I think have looked very good, and Shaheem Carter. I think Shaheem missed a tackle Saturday night. I think it's the first time I've ever seen him miss a tackle. He looks like he's just built to play that nickel or dime, depending on situations. Mostly nickel, it looks like to me, but I'll be the first to admit I get lost sometimes on who's what in those situations. And I think he's doing a fine job. And I'm really not putting the secondary as that room that I would have expected. I'm going to put it where you might not expect. I'm putting it in the offensive line room. And there's, a couple of guys on there that are preseason All-America, 4 returning starters, although one's injured right now. And I think that it's just the offensive line can take time to develop. They've actually only got one guy, even with 4 or 5 starters returning. Only one guy is playing the same position he played last year. Of course, the best one, Jonah Williams, at left tackle, but Ross Pierce-Baker, who's been obviously a very good center. Left guard, starting there 3 years. He's moved to center. And I'm not saying he's not playing well. I think he probably is. But it's still, he's in a new position. We had Womack get hurt, broke his foot, then he broke it again in fall camp, so he's out for a while. That meant a new right tackle, and there was some, that took some sorting. A while, Alex Leatherwood was playing right tackle in fall camp, and then, 10 days maybe before the starter, they started looking at Jedrick Wills at right tackle. He'd been at right guard and put Leatherwood at right guard. And then Lester Cotton, who played right last year, he's over at left guard. So you've had a lot of movement there, and now you've got not only guys not playing the same positions they played last year, you've got 2 of them that are playing positions they haven't played at all, really. Pierce-Baker at center and Leatherwood at guard. So to my way of thinking, Alabama, even though they put up, this sounds like a man who can't be pleased, I guess. But I just think that even with the offensive output that we've had at Alabama in the first 2 games, that would be the area that I would say still has work to be done, still has some consistency and some communications maybe, and some just getting used to it, playing together. That's what people talk about. You want to play the 5 best linemen, but what you really want to play are the 5 men who play the best together. Right. And Saban's also pointed out that you just because you're a good tackle doesn't mean you're a good guard. They seem on the outside to be, there's all offensive linemen except the center. He's got to snap the ball. The rest of them just block. But the positions are different. As Saban points out, things happen a lot quicker at guard. They're closer to the action, more or less. And then the tackles, of course, are in today's game are primarily concerned with pass blocking, which is an art to be sure, but it's a different art than what guards are doing ordinarily. So we'll see. Hopefully that kicking game's straightened out. Hopefully my eyes weren't deceiving me on what I've seen in the secondary. Of course we've started a little bit seeing throwing to the tight end, who we all know is always open, and they've gotten a few to Irv Smith Jr., which I know pleases just about everybody to see the tight end catch a ball.
Yeah, big game on Saturday with a touchdown catch, had a couple other longer grabs. Speaking of pass catching, Kirk, popping over to Bama Online, of course, where people can find you daily. Check out the message boards as well, where Kirk is very present. We're talking about a position that is on the other side of this. If you talk about the most stable and or talented rooms within that Alabama roster, some of the ones that would come to mind would be probably quarterback, running back, and definitely wide receiver. There's no doubt about the talent, the distribution talent at wide receiver, and I know you wrote about it on Sunday evening. When Bama fans click over there, what should they expect? Are you trying to stir up some controversy, some Kirk-troversy? What are we doing?
No. I think maybe taking up for the guys. I've heard a lot of commentators on college football talking about this team, Ole Miss, for instance, West Virginia, and others, maybe having even Clemson, of course, and of course we all know about Renfro, but
he's still there, man.
Talking about who has the best. Oh, yeah, I know it. He's going to have a doctorate, I guess, when he gets out. But those teams are, get that love as perhaps the best wide receiver group in the country. And, of course, I can understand Alabama maybe not getting that early on because of the loss of Ridley and 2 other starters. And so they've got 3 freshmen who were backups last year taking over those 3 starting positions. But I certainly have been opened now. They should have been opened earlier because those guys had some great moments as freshmen, as we all have seen, probably have seen more of one play from last football season than all the others put together nationally, and that is Devontae Smith reeling in that pass to win the championship game. So now Devontae's a starter along with Henry Ruggs III, and who led the team last year and 6 down receptions, which maybe went unnoticed, and Jerry Jeudy, who has started out gangbusters this year with already 4 touchdown receptions, and he says he's not as fast as Henry Ruggs, but we know one thing: nobody that he's played against yet has anybody who can catch him. So this is quite a talented group, and I think one that deserves to be mentioned as one of those with the skill and the results to be worthy of that conversation, at least, as best wide receiver group in the country. Of course, I think it goes hand in hand with having a lot of other pieces, notably quarterback. You have a tremendously accurate passer in Tua, and you also have a pretty good running game that keeps the opponents honest. So, but in any event, there's no question that these guys catch the ball and they know how to get to the end zone with it. So I look for big things from Alabama's wide receiver core this year.
Yeah, I think you're onto something there, Kirk, with the quarterback situation, because I think that influences our view of the best wide receiver cores all around America. But I also think another element that is kind of said without saying it is a lead dog, a top guy, a wide receiver 1. At West Virginia, it's undoubtedly David Sills, the big touchdown machine. At Clemson, it is becoming T. Higgins, another underclassman who has been highly rated and backed it up. I think that's maybe part of the problem perceptionally with these Alabama receivers. Who in the world is the top guy? They're all kind of similar and kind of different. All, but 6 foot and 6'2", all fairly slim, all really explosive. So in Kirk McNair's fantasy draft of Alabama wide receivers, who's the first wide receiver coming off the board for you, and why?
Well, last year I was very, very impressed in his freshman year with Jerry Jeudy, and he actually caught a couple more passes than Ruggs and several more than Smith over the course of the year, but with Ruggs scoring touchdowns on so many, I think 6 of his 6 first catches, 5 or 6 of them were touchdowns.
Yeah, amazing.
And then obviously Devontae Smith gets the game catch in the national championship game. So maybe Jerry Jeudy sort of would be listed third in a listing by many people, but I like everything about Jerry Jeudy. He is one thing I like about him particularly is I've seen him go over the middle, and he runs like he's out there by himself, which part of the time he is because he's pretty fast. But, there are a lot of guys that maybe have to take a peek around when they're running across the middle, but he doesn't seem to have any of that in him. He's full bore and catches the ball, and as we've seen, when he gets in the open field, he's got the jets. So if I had to pick one, I'd pick him, but what I really like is what Nick Saban gets to do. He gets to pick all 3 of them.
Yeah, for sure. And obviously Jalen Waddle and a bunch of other guys as well who are, as the season progresses, going to be more and more prevalent in the offense. All 3 of those guys, by the way, 5 stars somewhere or another, the recruiting world. So those were pretty easy evaluations, and I think everybody kind of got it right with those 3 guys. And that'll be a fun debate. And I think those guys are going to be compared to each other pretty much all the way through at this point because they all came in the same year with similar hype, and they've all produced darn well the first year and 2 games into their collegiate career. Kirk, before we let you go, you touched on the kickers briefly 2 questions ago. Is it Joseph's race to lose now? Are we still looking at Alabama trotting out whoever Nick Saban's gut feels at the moment? Where is the field goal kicking situation right now ahead of a game that, you may need that guy? The scores have been odd the first 2 weeks because of missed extra points. 51 points against Louisville, 57 against Arkansas State. How big of an issue is that, and is it something where it has to be solved right now?
Well, I think it has to be solved. I'd say right now. I don't think you can mess around with this. That doesn't mean that I think that Joe Bulovas is automatically going to have it for the rest of the year. I'm not on the practice field. I can't see what goes on out there, but obviously Austin Jones has done well out there because he was the starter at the start of the season and after the first game, even when he missed an extra point, and I thought had some near misses on a couple of others. As I pointed out on our board during the game, that makes me uncomfortable. I want to see an extra point kicked right down the middle. And I saw one, by the way, the other night watching the Thompson-Hoover game, and I think that there's a kid headed to Alabama next year who looks like he can be a pretty strong field goal and extra point, certainly extra point
Will Record, yep.
Kicker. Yep, he is. He looked pretty impressive to me. And so, I think it's always Nick Saban's decision. Whether it's a gut decision or, I think, probably based more on what he sees. He says all the time, your actions speak so loud, I can't hear what you're saying. And I think he's going to judge it. I think you have to put more weight on what happens in games than what happens in practice. So even though I believe you mostly play like you practice, there are exceptions, I'm sure. But I think it'll be the guy who's been most impressive in the games to date. It's been Bulovas. I think he'll probably be the guy that trots out there against Ole Miss this Saturday. As for, the overall kicking game, it's, Jalen Waddle didn't get any real punt return opportunities against the Arkansas State punter, but we saw what he could do when Louisville made the mistake of punting one he could return, or a couple really, and I think that Alabama's kickoff coverage has been fine. Their kickoffs have been fine. Their kickoff returns, of which there have been not very many opportunities. Obviously, when the other team's not scoring, they're not kicking off much. But it looks like it'll be fine. And also, to just carry off on another tangent, the way I'm going to do. It's like Alabama's plan is to kick it deep and see if they'll run it out or run it from around the goal line or not. There's been mixed on that so far. Alabama's plan appears to be business as usual. We're gonna run them back and think we can get past the 25. So and then the punting game, we've seen J.K. Scott is burned on all of our brains, and you want to see that towering, long, no return, down inside the 20, those sorts of things that J.K. Scott did so well for 4 years. And I'm not going to put Scott Long in that category yet, but I think he's been adequate. He's been, Nick Saban wants a 40-ish yard punt that's not returned. That suits him just fine. So I think Scott Long's certainly capable of doing that, maybe capable of doing more than that. But it doesn't look the same, but that doesn't mean it's not perfectly good.
Well, you kind of jumped into my world a little bit with that Hoover-Thompson visual, so I cannot let Mr. Kirk McNair go without embracing what made you just the most balanced guy in the business. People forget Kirk McNair invented recruiting coverage in the Alabama market. You don't have to be humble. I'll put it out there for you. So I need the assessment. What is the assessment on Talia Tagovailoa? How do you feel about George Pickens? and Will Reichard. What was the vibe in that Hoover victory over Thompson?
Yeah, there were several things that stood out, and all three of those guys are the real deal. There's no question about it. Also, the Hoover quarterback, I know he's not a senior. He's either a sophomore or a junior, I guess.
Junior, yep.
Was very good, and I thought the difference in the game was the ability of the Hoover quarterback to add a dimension of running, and the inconsistency of the Thompson receivers. They just had many drops, but they dropped very good passes. Little Tua, whatever we're calling him right now around here, he can sling it. He's right-handed, but otherwise he looks a lot like Tua, and he has that same accuracy, seems to see the field very well, that last interception notwithstanding. And then I mentioned the place kicker earlier looked good, but I thought that really Thompson didn't tackle very well, and the receivers were inconsistent. And yet, up until very, very late in the game, they had a chance to beat what I thought was a very good, consistent all-around Hoover team. So it was an enjoyable game. I enjoyed watching it, and obviously I was looking at certain players trying to see who might be a hidden gem out there. But of course, there's no such thing anymore. Too many astute recruiting observers and coaches. But there's not many that sneak by anymore.
That's true. But that's why you got to go out there and watch the guys play. Kirk McNair, ladies and gentlemen, he literally is it all, sir. We can't thank you enough for rejoining the program, and I guess next time we'll have you on, we'll know even more about all of these questions. Thank you again.
My pleasure, John.
Thank you to Kirk McNair, as always, an ace in the hole for us at CABC. The guy knows his stuff. He's got the historical context, the whole 9 yards. He is a cheat code for us here at Crimson and Blue Chips. And another cheat code is you guys. We love Q&A. It is the foundation of our show. You guys really bring it each and every episode, and it has not changed, even though we've moved to 3 episodes a week. Now, Q&A is a little bit different. We've had some different elements, but today let's go classic. Let's go with the digital Q&A at Twitter, or on Twitter, at CABC Pod. A couple of Instagram questions as well, and then we will let you get on your way on this Monday. Speaking of Twitter, at Bill Big D coming in with a recruiting question. We didn't talk much recruiting today, but we will get into it with you guys, Q&A style. Read earlier that the UGA 24/7 mod seemed a little less optimistic on Nakobe Dean after the pathetic FSU showing. Do you think Bama now leads? Also, who do you have rated higher, Dean or To'oto? Secondly, besides Pickens, do you see Bama getting involved with some higher rated wide receivers? So pure recruiting from Bill Big D. I know that'll make several listeners happy. Look, Nakobe Dean is going to be a bit of a mystery all the way through. Everybody has held buzz at some point with Nakobe. In early June, it was Bama. Coming off the official, everything was good. Mom endorsed Bama, the whole thing. Then it was Georgia. Georgia was going to get multiple visits. Mom was a big fan again. And then it was Florida State, the school that a lot of people thought surged ahead of everybody off of one visit. Look, again, one game or one effort isn't going to change a lot of college football recruitments. I think a theme for an entire season surely would cause a change in some kids' recruitment, but the kids who are more inclined to change their mind based off of Saturday results are not 4.0 students who have kind of a bigger goal ahead. And I think that's what Nakobe Dean is. He's a guy who is a big picture kid. You know, it's the same reason why Ole Miss is still being considered, while Mississippi State's being considered. LSU, Bama, Florida State, Georgia, a lot of schools still in the mix here. He's a big picture kid. If he was just looking at winning, it would just be Bama, Georgia in his conversation. If he was just looking at other elements, it would just be the in-state schools. He's a big picture kid, so I don't think any one showing from any school, good or bad, will really influence Nakobe Dean very much. Of course, the kid wants to play and all of those things, but I don't think any one showing is going to boom or bust a school pursuing his commitment. So I don't know if Bama leads. Hank South talked to him over the weekend. I encourage you to check out that article on Bama Online. And Dean's really not giving much away. He says he's not even thinking about his recruitment. And it's part of the reason why he's been so polarizing in terms of who leads, who's really in it, who's got the best shot for his services. And I think all of that goes together. So a long way to go for Nakobe Dean. He is a December decider, so not too long, 3+ months from now we'll know, but it seems like he doesn't even know at this point. So I think that's certainly something to consider. I wouldn't say Bama leads. I wouldn't say anybody leads at this point. I think with certain kids, you kind of believe them when they give you some information on the recruiting process, and I think Nakobe Dean is one of those kids. I think he legitimately doesn't have a great idea at this point. Now, are 7 schools in it like he says they are? Probably not. It's probably a smaller number, but we know Bama's in that mix, and I think at this point, that's all you can hope for with a guy who, for my money, theoretical money, is the most important recruit remaining in this class of 2019 in terms of who Alabama is pursuing. The next question Bill submitted: who do I have rated higher, Dean or Henry To'oto? I go Dean. I think he's the complete package at inside linebacker in this era of college football. Smart, athletic, can play the run, can rush the passer, can cover, just does everything pretty well. I think Henry To'oto is a little bit more of a classic inside backer, if that makes sense. Maybe not a guy who can do all those things, although very good with physicality coming downhill with some of those classic inside linebacker traits that maybe these current Alabama linebackers aren't the best at. So I think they kind of balance each other out, actually, with how the game has progressed to this point. But I think Dean just does everything so well. I think he's the best linebacker in the country because he does everything so well. Not necessarily Dylan Moses status in terms of what he can do, but he's on that track where he could do a little bit of everything, even carry the football very well. Had 2 touchdowns over the weekend when Hank went to go watch him play against Daxton Hill. So I have Dean a little bit higher, but again, To'oto, big, strong, physical, downhill, explosive cat that I think can become a complete linebacker. Maybe not there today, but can get to that point. More from Bill Big D. Besides Pickens, do you see Bama getting involved with some higher-rated wide receivers? Bama's got a commitment from John Mechie right now out of New Jersey via Canada. They're very happy with that, but it's very clear Bama would like to pair him with another wide receiver. Now, George Pickens is the easy prospect to talk about. He's in state. He's got the offer. He's being heavily pursued, all of those things. But he's not alone. I think Jamison Williams from the Midlands is a guy who we still need to monitor in covering Alabama football. I think there's a couple of other guys who could become important recruits for Alabama. Not sure how heavily Alabama's pursuing others beyond Jamison Williams, George Pickens, and of course Wan'Dale Robinson, the guy some people think is Jalen Waddle-like. I'm not there yet, but he's a big-time prospect coming from the Midwest. So I think those are the guys. Now, it could change. Remember, these high school seniors are just a couple of games into their senior year, and Bama has hosted some other receivers. Edward Gibson was on campus Saturday, kid out of Pelham, who I spoke with, 6'3 plus, around 200 pounds, super athlete. I think he could be a wide receiver or an outside backer at the next level. This is a big, strong cat that Alabama is now kind of keeping an eye on. He spoke to Nick Saban. He spoke to both coordinators. So that doesn't happen for your run-of-the-mill kid who's not really in the conversation. So I think he's a guy to keep an eye on in-state. If there had to be another in-stater, I wouldn't sleep on – if Bama's looking for another slot type like they are with Wan'Dale Robinson, I wouldn't sleep on an in-stater who's committed to Auburn, another one in Javarius Johnson. I wonder if Alabama ends up hitting the gas for him. He's having a big year as Paul Tyson's #1 target at Hewitt-Trussville. So I think a couple of other receivers can be in the mix, but for now, when you think about wide receivers Bama would like to pair with John Mechie. It still starts with Pickens, but you go to Robinson and you go to Williams very soon thereafter. So those are the three guys for now, but I'd keep an eye on a couple of in-staters after that should things break a certain way. Good questions on the recruiting side from Bill Big D. Raphael Monroy chiming in. Hope all is well. Great game. Was surprised to see the stadium empty out so early. Yeah, don't ask Nick about that one. Raphael goes on and says, any buzz on recruits? Feels like it's been real quiet since the season started. Yeah, it's by design. August is a big dead period in the current recruiting calendar. Everybody's getting focused on their football season, so not a lot of room for recruiting in between. However, that's going to change now that September is here. And the reason you've felt it's been quiet is because Bama had a neutral site game and then had its home opener. So it was a good visitor list. We talked about it on Friday with Hank South. Clay Webb showed up. Nathan Pickering showed up. Maybe most interestingly, a lot of in-state commits and semi-local commits showed up, and a couple of interesting uncommitted guys. We mentioned Edward Gibson a little bit earlier. I think he's one to keep an eye on. Mississippi State commitment Trenton Yao was on campus in the class of 2020. He could be one as he physically matures that Bama can pursue at some point. Remember, he's coached by Andrew Zhao and Antonio Langham, teammates with 2020 Bama commitment Jason Jones. So there's a heavy Bama feel on that entire high school program at Calera, so that could develop into something down the road as well. A couple of other kids able to get on campus on Saturday too, so not a lot of buzz in terms of tangible, hey, this kid got an offer, hey, this kid committed, nothing like that. But again, getting the number one player in the state on campus who is a priority is important in Clay Webb. Any pursuit of flipping Nathan Pickering was going to begin with a visit, and this is the first visit he's taken since committing to Mississippi State. So that's big for Bama, and he has confirmed to Hank South that he will take an official visit to Tuscaloosa, and he is a December decider as well. So Pickering on campus in September theoretically could come back in the next month or two before a final decision. So Bama's going to have every possible shot at flipping Nathan Pickering. So I think that is ideal for Alabama in terms of this past weekend. And again, with less recruits on campus, this is something Hank said that made a lot of sense. With less recruits on campus, more time with each recruit from the coaches. You're game planning, you're preparing for a game and all that, but if there's 100 recruits, you don't really have much time to mingle, to catch up with parents, catch up on kids with their high school games and stuff like that. But when there's a couple dozen, now you have the chance to do that. And from what we gather at this point, Alabama did that with kids with offers, committed elsewhere, or even without offers from Alabama. They were able to do that. They had that type of time. Again, Edward Gibson told me that Nick Saban was complimenting him from their biggest win of the season at Pelham when they did beat the aforementioned Calera. Gibson had a big game in that effort. So they were able to do those kind of things on a weekend like this. So you set a foundation with certain kids on a weekend like this. And obviously you get Clay Webb, you get Nathan Pickering back on campus, a bunch of commits that you still have to recruit, frankly, in this day and age. So not buzzworthy in terms of the tangible, but still notable that, Bama Online, yours truly, 24/7 Sports, was able to confirm some big names on campus, period, regardless of their status. So in that way, you'll hear a little bit of buzz, and again, check Bama Online for the latest with those guys. More from Raphael. The offense, going back to the team here, the offense has got to get better. It's pretty scary for the rest of their opponents. Roll Tide Roll from Long Island, New York. It's only going to get better. The offensive line is only going to grow in chemistry with continuity. The quarterbacks are only going to be more settled in this Mike Locksley offense. Remember, these wide receivers, although talented, still pretty green in terms of consistent reps with the ones. So I think that is going to be a part of the conversation moving forward as well, especially as SEC play begins Saturday. Remember, let's say last year against Ole Miss, it was Calvin Ridley, it was Cam Sims. It was a different group out there. Now, all of these young guys are on the field together. So for 60 minutes as opposed to here and there type stuff. So I think that group is still, even though it's so strong and maybe the best position group on the roster, that group is still kind of finding its niche there. So I think a lot of the question marks are going to be answered in the next couple of months before the marquee games, LSU, Auburn, Mississippi State, etc. So I'm not sleeping on Texas A&M or Ole Miss, but Alabama should be able to get by those games. Texas A&M played a little bit better than a lot of people expected against Clemson, or maybe Clemson played down to the competition. We're not sure, but Bama will be favored in each game it plays, and I think those games will be double digits in the how much is Bama favored by department. So, yeah, it should be scary, Raphael. With a quarterback rotation and with Bama kind of relaxing in terms of how aggressive it is in the second half of the first two games, still put up 50+ with relative ease in each of those games. So like everybody keeps saying in our YouTube comments and even on Twitter, what happens when Bama's playing those guys full speed ahead for 60 minutes? We have not seen anything close to that just yet. So I think that's certainly a reason to be optimistic that this offense not only will get better overall, but will score more points, which is indeed scary. We've got an Instagram question to get to. Our buddy Smitty, a.k.a. El Oso Negro, commented at CABC Pod on Instagram, by the way. John, Tua looks unstoppable, and Jalen is learning not to run before going through every read. I was happy to see that. By the way, where's Ben Davis? Also, I don't think Ole Miss puts up over 14 on Bama. Our DBs will be ready. Your thoughts? A lot there to get to from Smitty. Yeah, look, I thought, I don't think it's hard to break down that Jalen Hurts was really good on Saturday. He fumbled the one run, but he was a passer. I think he was 6 of 7 at one point, made good reads, and made the toughest play a quarterback can make. Standing in there, knowing you're about to get drilled from a guy who destroys an offensive lineman and comes clean, and delivering an accurate football. And he did that on the touchdown pass to Irv Smith. So Jalen definitely looked like he was at his best as a passer in several months and maybe over a year to some. So that is certainly positive news, regardless of how the quarterback distribution plays out moving through the next few games. But Ben Davis, look, we saw him on the sidelines. He didn't get in with the twos. I don't know. I don't know anymore with Ben. He was running with the outside linebackers towards the end of fall camp, but it's very clear that Jamie Mosley is that next outside linebacker up. Remember, Terrell Lewis injured. Chris Allen injured. So beyond starters, Anthony Jennings and Christian Miller, it's really like those guys' game to lose. And the first guy off the bench is Jamie Mosley. Ayabi Onoma is next after that. So maybe Bama never got to the threes on the edge, but it's clear that Ben Davis is in that third group if he is still working exclusively with the outside linebackers. And conversely, with the inside linebackers, after Moses and Mac Wilson, it has been very consistently Josh McMillan and Markel Benton. Ale Caho's gotten some third-team run there as well. So, look, he's seemingly been passed up by younger guys. Jalen Moody has gotten a couple of snaps as well. So I'm just not sure with Ben Davis anymore. He's there, but he's certainly not on the field, and that's, we don't know all the reasons why. Position changes, really good freshmen underneath him, passing him by, things like that. We don't have all the answers with Ben. It looked like at one point in camp he was going to kind of turn the corner. Didn't necessarily happen. And then, as you said, Smitty, or as you boldly are predicting, and we'll mark this down, we'll have producer Kev mark it down, you don't see Ole Miss putting up 14 or more on Bama. That, for a team coming off a 70-point performance, that is pretty bold. I think Bama physically has the ability to match up with these wide receivers. DK Metcalf, big, strong guy, 6'4 plus, 220. Everybody knows A.J. Brown at this point. It's not just those two, but those are the main two. Bama's got size on the outside. Pat Surtain, 6'2". Trevon Diggs, 6'1.5". Savion Smith, 6'1". All those guys are long. All those guys have ball skills. But those guys are a different animal when you're talking about Ole Miss. And theoretically, Alabama will be ahead in this game. So those guys will be chucking it that much more. So I think 14 is an ambitious number, Smitty. I'd probably go 17 plus into the 20s. I think Bama wins comfortably, yes. But in the early looks at Ole Miss, it's hard to imagine them staying in the teens. But if anybody can do it, y'all know who it could be. It could be Bama. So it's definitely going to be the top test for this young secondary, or inexperienced secondary, I should say. But size-wise on the edge, purely guy versus guy, Bama looks to be as well lined up as anybody Ole Miss will face all year long. So I think that benefits the Crimson Tide. And again, if Bama's got a lead and a sizable one at one point, the defense knows what's coming. So I think that will help Alabama combat Brown and Metcalf and those guys a little bit more. We'll take a closer look at Ole Miss later in the week, but never too early to look at Alabama opening SEC play. Thank you to Smitty for the Instagram question. Thank you to Raphael Monroy, Bill Big D. Couple of Twitter questions in at Crimson and Blue Chips, again, at CABC Pod on most mediums, or you can email us, cabcpod@gmail.com. Thanks for listening, everybody. Hope you had a great Monday. We'll see you in a couple of days with new podcasts, supplemental content, all of that on our YouTube page. So search and subscribe to Crimson and Blue Chips. God bless. Garcia out.